Greetings, everybody. Happy New Year. This is your host, Sophia Nelson, and welcome to the Redefining Freedom Season 6 opener. It is MLK Day 2024, and this is our first video podcast. And I have a special guest for you today. There's a lot to talk about on this Martin Luther King Day. This country, the United States of America, is dealing with a lot right now. A lot in our politics, a lot in our culture, a lot in our higher educational institutions. And so I wanted an expert on with me today, being that it's MLK Day, being that we're going into Black History Month. And for those who are watching, who are my Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority sisters, happy Founders Day, a very special day in our sisterhood. And we're going to talk about one of ours who unfortunately lost her life to a tragic suicide on one of our nation's college campuses, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But first, let me introduce my guest. I have with me today someone who's a dear friend, who is just a wonderful human being and a great voice in higher education, and that is Dr. Kenya Ayers-Palmore. She is the most recent past president of Tarrant County Community College District, and in Fort Worth is the campus that she was the president of. She is the first Black woman in the history of the school to serve as president of that campus, which is a great accomplishment. And Kenya has a lot of amazing accomplishments under her belt. You can look her up, you can Google her. We'll have her bio up both on the audio podcast and on the video here when we upload this. But I think one of my favorite things about her, in addition to her having a master's degree and a PhD, is that she is an ordained minister. And I like that because I think that makes her a very well-rounded person. She is someone who engages with students, with her peers, with faculty, with the community, but she also has that spiritual piece that I think, again, on MLK Day is so important for us to tap into, because Dr. King was many things. He was a great leader. He was a great orator. He was a great bridge builder. But most of all, he was a pastor. He was the shepherd. He was the leader of the flock, that spark that ignited the civil rights movement, along with Rosa Parks and his wife Coretta, our soror, and others. So we're going to talk about African Americans in higher education today. That's our kickoff podcast. We're going to talk about what's going on with the way Black women are being treated. Both of us haven't experienced this firsthand as academics. And Kenya, welcome to the Redefining Freedom video podcast. Thank you for being our first guest of the new year. I want you
Thank
to
you.
talk a little bit about, set the table for us about where we are in the year 2024 as African Americans in higher education. Just kind of give us an overview of how many of us are there, where are we, what positions are we in, not in, what's it look like?
Mm, Great question. First of all, good morning. It's such a joy to spend this time with you, Sophia. The feelings are all mutual. I just have so much respect for you, for your voice, and the way that you are a thought leader for the world. So just thank you for sharing your gifts with everyone, especially on MLK Day. I really appreciate what you said about the importance of this day and who Dr. King was. I will put it to you this way. When Dr. King was talking about having a dream and what he imagined, it was not what we're facing today in 2024 in higher education. You know, the dream was that there would be no distinction in the treatment of any American, regardless of creed and skin tone and all of those things, country of natural origin. And so to find ourselves in this place where there are more and more students who come in the door of our educational institutions, fewer that are coming out of the door, particularly our students of color, and in this horrific season where there seems to be an open season on Black women in particular within the academy.
Let's talk about that. Obviously, I think first of mind for everybody is Dr. Claudine Gay at Harvard. Let me kind of take us back for those of you who don't remember how the whole brouhaha started with Dr. Gay at Harvard. First of all, you got to go back, Kenya, to when she was first appointed. There were a lot of folks that weren't happy about that. Okay, the first
Sure.
Black president, not the first Black female. Some of y'all got to get your language right. The first Black president of Harvard in 387 years, the second female
Period.
in Harvard's history.
That's right.
Okay. And so a lot of folks, Kenya, weren't happy about that. Speak to that a
Mhm.
little bit before we get to what happened that followed. Why weren't
Sure.
folks happy that this accomplished Black woman was named president of Harvard?
Because she was an accomplished Black woman. So Harvard, of course, is our oldest and most revered institution of higher education, founded in the 1600s with a very particular mission. Over time, the prestige of a Harvard education continues to grow to this day. I don't know if you know this about me. I had the chance to spend a couple of weeks one summer in a leadership program on that campus.
I do.
And my admiration only grew for all that that institution has to offer. It is an important icon for America and for education throughout the world. The anger about her post, it seems, I would describe it as a polarization. There were people on one hand who rejoiced, who were excited to see that there was an opportunity for a woman of color, not just because she was a Black woman, but because she came to the table qualified to do the job, that she was going to have that opportunity to show who we are when we show up and lead at our best. And on the other hand, there were many who were just horrified, unwilling to accept the fact that someone with her phenotype um, and gender would show up and have the audacity to try and lead this most revered organization of higher education. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it was very much split.
yeah. So I think that to fast
Mm,
forward, let's go to December 2023. And the Ivy League presidents of three schools, MIT, Penn, and Harvard, were called before the United States Congress to, in my humble opinion, rightly testify on the anti Semitism and the hostilities going on
that's right.
some of our most premier campuses, not just the Ivies, public universities, private universities, post the attack on Israel of October 7th, the horrific attacks. And it, Kenya, I got to tell you, I was shocked. I'm a student of history like you. I understand the Holocaust and the hatred against Jews. It goes back to scripture.
Absolutely.
But to see it play out the way it did here in Virginia, in Charlottesville in
Mm,
2015, with
that's right.
Take Back the Night March in Charlottesville and the white supremacists there and the rallies and the violence. It kind of started there, and then we saw it really spill over in 2023 on these college campuses, first over free
Mhm.
speech issues, and then it devolved into something that had nothing to do with free speech. And so,
That's right.
as you all will recall, these three female college presidents, again, of Penn, MIT, and Harvard, totally bungled, messed up, massacred their testimony. It was terrible. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would offer this perspective. In fact, I don't know if I've told you, I was listening to Trevor Noah and an interview he did right after all of this happened. And I so wished we'd had an academic person in the conversation because the perspective that came up was that presidents don't care about students. Presidents are just about getting money in the door. And I would say that the testimonies given by these three leaders were really unfortunate in that they satisfied the letter of the law and they were being advised by legal
Mhm.
counsel, but they didn't speak to the morality of what every parent wants to hear, which is when my child comes to your campus, they are safe. It
In
doesn't
loco
matter their
parentis.
background,
That's
their
right.
origin. Mhm.
Yeah,
That's right.
if that's your
That's right.
job, part as president. Yeah.
It is. We are to be the ones having oversight for the protection, the care, as you said, in loco parentis. And so there is an expectation. And with an issue that is so hot button and causing angst all over the world, people were looking for thought leadership and they were expecting presidents to weigh in with compassion, with empathy, with a deep understanding. Um, I would say, however, while their answers were legally right, it just left such a gap for the listeners, a gap for Congress, and it just sort of elevated the frustration with these elite institutions and their leaders.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, one of the struggles we're having in our country right now as we fight to keep our democracy intact and our freedoms is the issue of what's moral and what isn't, which used to never be an issue.
That's right.
Uh,
Mhm.
we've changed a lot in terms of the way we view the world. It happens in every generation,
That's
but there
true.
used to be a thread. If I think of my grandparents, who were the greatest generation, and my parents who are baby boomers, I'm an
That's right.
Xer, you're an Xer, and
Yes.
we're early Xers, and we're Xers, but there was a continuity there of things you did, things you didn't do, what was right,
That's
what
right.
was wrong, and those lines have been blurred. And I agree with you that when they started to talk about context, people were like, wait a minute, there is no
Right.
context when students are being
That's right.
locked in a library and people are chanting anti-Semitic, hateful, violent,
Yeah.
ugly things
That's
and
right.
threatening and ripping down posters. And that leads us into, what happened, where all of them caught
Mhm.
hell after that testimony.
They did. They
But
did.
there was something ugly that happened. And that's where I want
That's
to
right.
kind of open our dialogue, focusing on Black women and how Claudine Gay has become the poster child of how Black women in academia are treated. Again, I've experienced it firsthand, as have you. But when Penn's
Yeah.
president resigned, when Liz McGill decided, you know what, the donors were upset, the Jewish donors were upset, a lot of money, McGill bowed out pretty quickly, with pressure for
Mhm.
sure, but realized, I'm going to get out of this. They left her
Saw the
alone.
handwriting.
Yeah, she has her
Yeah.
tenured position, fine. MIT's president really didn't kind of catch anything. Whatever was happening at MIT, they just kind of were like, yeah, we're not dealing with this and we're moving on. But
Yeah.
Gay, it went a whole nother way. And
It did.
Ackman, Rufo, and these guys, the white billionaire hedge fund guys, the donors, really came after her with a viciousness. I mean, Rufo actually used the term, we're going to scalp her. I mean, think of what scalping means. It means to kill, to
Yeah.
scalp.
It does. It
Thoughts?
does.
And then you saw what happened. They
Mm.
ultimately accused her of plagiarism, and they kept doubling down until they got her in the crosshairs enough where Harvard Corporation was under a lot of pressure to deal with this. And she probably realized, you know what, I'm not going to survive this, 6 months in, and I'm done. Your thoughts on how this all played out
That's
and
right.
the difference between how she was treated as opposed to her two white female peers?
So it's interesting to talk about her experience and how disparate it was is not to negate that they had experiences
Right,
that were
right,
difficult and challenging.
right.
What's unique about Dr. Gay's experience is as you listen to Ackman and others who are very bold about the fact that there was an attack and interest in removing her from the proverbial throne early on. And so
They were very
what I've
candid
tried
about
to
how they felt. Yeah, they were.
candid and targeted and clear. So let me take this back to put it in context. You talked about what we think of as consensus values, right? Honesty, integrity,
Mhm.
fairness, kindness. So many of those qualities have been removed from the day-to-day experience in our political realm, in our day-to-day interactions. It has become more challenging for people to see that there are more than one way to be good, as my mother likes to say. It's my way or the highway, and in that
Yep.
context enters Dr. Claudine Gay, longstanding member of the Harvard community, to bring out and to highlight what happened with her does not in any way say that someone reflects or condones plagiarism. And I feel
Absolutely.
like that's the polarization of the argument that's come forth.
Right. Well, that's the
The
pretext.
question
Let's
people
pause
should
there.
consider is why it is. Yep, you're
Yeah,
right.
hold that thought, Kenya, because I think
Sure.
that's a place to put a pin in. And we're gonna want to wrap this a little bit because video allows us only so much time, and then we're gonna go over to the audio. So stay tuned because we're gonna
Sounds
get into
good.
some good stuff on the audio. But I think
Love
the
it.
important thing is what Dr. Kendi says, a BU, that there's always a pretext when they come for Black folks, particularly Black women,
Yes,
that we've done
that's right.
something so bad and so egregious that,
So
or not
egregious.
even bad
Mhm.
or egregious, but there is an argument that is made to draw consensus, i.e., she's a plagiarist, she's unqualified, she's a DEI person,
That's
she's
right.
an affirmative action hire, therefore we can treat her viciously, unkindly. We can really, borrowing Clarence Thomas's phrase, engage in a high-tech lynching, and we can do that in
Mhm.
broad daylight, just like we used to do in an actual lynching. And yes, I'm using that language because it's important, it's historical, and
Of
it
course.
matters. Your thoughts on that as we wrap
That's
down
right.
the video version of this podcast, and we're going to go over to the audio, folks. But we wanted to have a teaser so you could see us and hear us and get the
Mhm.
dialogue going. Kenya, thoughts on that, on how
That's
we're
right.
treated
I
and how there's always an excuse given for how they come at us and take us out?
Succinctly, I'll just say yes, yes, and amen. You're absolutely right. It is very intentional. And in 2024, Black women have had enough. I will say this from a spiritual perspective. I really am praying deeply for both the soul of America
Mm,
as well as for all of the Black women, women of the global majority who carry this deep hurt, rejection, and marginalization in their souls, in their bodies. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. It
yeah,
has
it's a
to go
great book.
somewhere. When you're taught to be strong, to be stoic, to be superwoman, to be, 10 times better than, to work so many more hours, and then to have this the situation where you're summarily dismissed, it impacts us deeply and it has to stop. I look forward
Yeah.
to the rest of our conversation.
Folks, we have not gotten in just to set the table for what we're going to get into on the podcast as we continue this very important discussion on MLK Day and kick off season 6 of the podcast. Dr. Bonnie Bailey at Lincoln University in Missouri committed suicide. It was in all the news over the weekend. She's a sorority sister of mine, a beloved
Mhm.
academic, a dean, um, married, a family. She clearly was dealing with mental health issues that was disclosed to her employer. She needed empathy, she needed support, that psychological safety, that wellness in the workplace, whether it's in a predominantly
That's
white
right.
institution like Harvard or an HBCU, as where she was. But the treatment, the bullying, the harassment, the vile things that were said and done, emails have surfaced. Um, that someone took their life,
Mhm.
a vibrant, accomplished, educated Black woman. And by the way, there are only 1 in 10 Black female college presidents in this country, of which you were one, Kenya. And, I think we're 3% of all academics in the country, Black women, Black people, maybe 4 or 5%, if that. Same in the legal profession, same in the medical profession. Which brings me to, I do not know why our white brothers and sisters are so angry and what they're upset about, because they still have 95+% of the jobs in every single industry that there is. And our white sisters have achieved parity now. In the legal profession, there was an article out last week. I say all that to set the table with this, that we as Black women are uniquely under duress and attack for the reasons you outlined, Kenya, that we are taught from the time we're little girls to always be strong, always be on, to never complain, to carry and not cast, totally
That's
against scriptural admonition from Jesus. But the point is
that's
that
right.
that's
Yep.
what we've been taught to do. And that
Mhm.
we need to be very clear as women now who are left. We have to do something with Bonnie's memory, and we have to make sure this never happens again. Your closing thoughts
That's
as we end this. We've got about 5 minutes left, and just really want to let you just talk a little bit, because you've been through this, and we'll talk about this more on the podcast. I've been through this, and there's nothing worse than being bullied and harassed in a public way. It does damage to you. It does.
It does, and it starts with toxicity behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
What we experience privately manifests, publicly, and sometimes we're not even positioned to tell the full story. And so
Mhm.
I just appreciate you creating a platform where we can honor women like Dr. Bailey, who it is not easy to rise to the level of vice president in which she operated for her campus and to be responsible for the student body and their holistic support is a weighty matter. But that she complained about the experiences she was having in the workplace and workplace bullying, and no one did anything about it is completely unacceptable. It's
Yeah, I
just
mean,
unacceptable.
it's
And
it's
so,
it's
what
beyond
we're going to do
unacceptable.
about
There
it?
will be a massive lawsuit. There will be legal liability. This will be a real problem. That school is going to go through a very
Oh, for
difficult
sure.
time, as will her family most of all. But folks, we're going to wind down again our inaugural video podcast, and we're going to go over to the audio where we can really dig in and get into some stuff. And I'm going to have Kenya share with all of you what she just experienced in her position as the first Black female president of a community college campus in Texas, the largest system in that region of Texas, might be in the whole state, right? The Tarrant County, Dallas, Fort Worth area.
Definitely in the region. In the region, I think Dallas College is slightly larger,
Okay.
and then Lone Star in Houston, but very significant in size. 50,000
Yeah.
about credit students, and
Wow.
then many, many more thousands on the non-credit side. It's a big place, 6 campuses, so
Yeah,
we'll talk
we will. You'll be seeing a
for
lot of
sure.
Kenya over these next weeks and months, and we're all gonna work on some great things together, led by her. And I'll let her get into some of that when we talk in the podcast. But again, we wanted you to see us on this MLK Day. We wanted to, of course, pay honor to Dr. King and his legacy. And I think if he were here right now, I'm curious. Kenya, you got about I can give you a minute. What do you think Dr. King would think about where we are right now as Black people, some 60 years after the Civil Rights Movement?
Oh, I think he'd be gravely disappointed, and, um, I think there would be what we need to do. There would be a call to arms. There would be, and I don't mean little arms, I mean a call to unity, a call for impacted people and allies to come together and to determine a course of action for moving forward. Not to ruminate over the issues, but to say, we know what the issues are. What
Mm-hmm.
are we going to do to really make long term change for women of the global majority who lead? It's time. People don't deserve what's going on for them. And he will to intervene and to strengthen us for the task ahead.
Folks, whenever you're doing technology, you know that there will always be some hiccups, and there's been a little bit with Dr. Ayers-Palmore's video, but pretty good otherwise. But again, we will go through all this on the audio podcast, and I'll end with the words of Malcolm X: "The least protected, least respected woman on the planet is the Black woman." And it's a paraphrase, but he said that in the 1960s, and that needs to change, and we're going to help to lead that change. Kenya, thank you for joining us on our first video podcast. This was awesome. I look
Thank
forward to
you.
everybody seeing it today and beyond, and I will see you on the audio shortly. Have a good day, everybody. God bless.
Good. All right. Thank you. God bless.